Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. It's How Cutting Corners Connect Your Brewery. My name is Pulkit K. Agrawal. I'm the founder and CEO of Beer30 by the Fifth Ingredient. And joining me is the lovely Samantha Aycock from Revel CPA. So today we'll just start off by doing some quick reminders. First thing, if anybody watching has some questions, drop them into the chat. We are recording this, so we will be emailing this as a copy. We'll be posting this on YouTube, things like that as well. And you're more than welcome at any point whenever somebody's watching this to reach out directly to me, reach out directly to Samantha, and go from there as well. So just designed to be a very educational experience for everybody watching and everybody involved. So it should be fun. So with that, let's just do some quick introductions. My name is Pulkit K. Agrawal, like I mentioned, founder and CEO of Beer30 by the Fifth Ingredient. We're going to be going on to close to 7 years in October. It'll be 7 years of having the company. My quick background is that I studied mechanical engineering at Harvard University. From there, moved to San Diego to work as a process engineer at Ballast Point Brewing, really focusing on the process side. So bottling, canning, kegging, packaging equipment, nitrogen beer production and filtration, and helped them with the expansion to Virginia. And then a few years later, left and started the Fifth Ingredient with the idea of consulting for breweries. During that time, realized that many breweries were on paper logs, spreadsheets, or other competing softwares and really didn't have anything on the process side. And that's really how Beer30 came about. And in present day, Beer30 is a full end-to-end system. We have over 450 breweries, 19 plus countries. And it's been great. It's going to be awesome to just tie in today and focus on the importance of having these types of discussions on strategy, especially for 2025. So super excited to put this together.
Awesome. Thank you. Yes, I'm Samantha Aycock. I started with Lance CPA Group, which some of you may be familiar with. We've been in the craft beer space, accounting firm that focuses on craft breweries for 9 years. And effective July 1, we were acquired by Revel CPA. So I'm the director of growth, do a lot of support for breweries, and specifically, it's not just the books, right? It's like the strategic advisory, talking about your, end goals, your exit strategy, what you hope to achieve with your brewery, and taking those steps to get you there.
Beautiful. Thank you. So with that, let's talk about today's agenda. I'm going to start off by going into a bit of the state of the industry. For everybody watching, it's been a bit of a rough time, but we'll talk about that and kind of go from there. Samantha, you're always welcome to add in your own spin on this as well as we get into the state of the industry.
Okay.
Operations, Samantha is going to get into that, and then more on payroll, accounting systems, brewery management. Samantha is then going to get into tap rooms, and I'm going to get into 6 areas of profit analysis. We'll then have a bit of a closing and some questions and answers. So it should lead to a pretty good agenda and workflow for today. So with that, let's talk a bit about the industry. So these are diagrams coming directly from the Brewers Association. And as most of us know, over the last 2 to 3 years, production has definitely decreased for the overall craft segment. Right? We start seeing here, for example, from the BA, that overall beer is down close to 5%. We're looking at craft is down 1%. And a lot of the stuff when you look at from CBC this year, looking at Bart Watson's whole state of the industry, there's a lot more diversification that's happening. We're getting out of necessarily beer and getting into ready to drink, getting into seltzers, cocktails, other spirits, things like that. And just as a whole, the industry is hurting when you start looking at cost of goods increasing for customers. Looking at in Australia, the tax reliefs that happened during COVID now coming back with the Australian ATO and things like that from a cash flow perspective that breweries are hurting. And on our end with the Fifth Ingredient, that is one of our biggest churn reasons right now is just breweries shutting down. And when we start breaking that down, from the BA, 2023, 165 brew pub openings with 145 brew pub closings. Looking at the micro side, we actually had more micro closings than opening, 92 to 40. And when you look at it from a taproom side, looking at 288 taproom openings to 168 closings. So as you can see with these diagrams and trending, there's a lot more closures happening from a percentage-wise than there are openings. And so there's something to be very mindful of, that what this really tells us as a whole is that it's becoming more and more competitive for craft beer. One of my favorite quotes was from Scott Metzger from Craft Ohana. at CBC, which is your brewery is a business, not a hobby. And it's more important now than ever to be more strategic, make plans for the future, and really for everybody watching this, getting into what does H2 2024 and 2025 entail for your brewery and business, right? And really from our perspective and from my team's perspective, really what we tell anybody that we're talking to in the industry is when you're focusing on things, really there's three key areas that come to mind of what really keeps a business going. It becomes quality. You got to keep your customers happy. At this point, if you're making beer that isn't up to par, a customer can literally just go right down the street to another brewery, and that's it. You've lost their business forever, right? Potentially. And so the quality is key when it comes to having a successful business at this point. From there, getting into efficiency, where you're really looking at, hey, you want more output in the same exact time frame, right? You want it to be that you're not actually getting to have to buy more tanks, getting into more capital expenses. But what can you do in those same 14 days of turnaround time for a particular IPA of getting more beer out the door, right? And then the third aspect is sales. What are you going to do to keep growing your profit margins? And this is a time frame more than ever where it's so competitive that understanding your COGS and getting in from a revenue perspective and sales is critical for any brewery that still wants to stay in business and keep focusing on growth. So it's really from my end what's happening from a state of the industry. Samantha, would love your thoughts on that as well before we get into some of the payroll and operations side.
Oh, the state of the industry has made me very emotional and a little depressed. It's been hard. It's been really hard to watch these people that we love struggle. The stuff that came around during COVID, PPP, ERC, EIDL, it was honestly like a stay of execution in a way. You know what I mean? And like having that stuff come now, and it's like the idle payments are due now. And it's like, it's hitting us when we can't really afford to be hit, right? Because we have, a lot happening in the, sober movement. And then we have a lot happening in, RTD and seltzer and kombucha and hard tea and all these other options. There's all these other competitors now to craft beer that weren't as big in, 2017, 2018. And so it's been hard. It's been rough. I have a lot of breweries that feel like they're hanging on by a thread. And the thing about the industry is, in general, the craft beer industry is so collaborative, so cool, just like good humans, which is great, extremely helpful to one another. But the one thing that I don't think we talk openly enough about is our struggles, our financial struggles, because a lot of my clients don't realize that the brewery across the street is hurting just as bad as them. You know what I mean? So I think that's, something I'd like to see more. I don't want to see as much shame around the breweries that are filing bankruptcy or shutting down. Like, that's not shameful. You know what I mean? We'd be nowhere without the risk takers. We needed those entrepreneurs. We needed that experience. So it's been hard, and I've been counseling and coaching in different arenas than I had expected to 5 years ago. But it's it's special, it's meaningful, it's tied to my heart for sure.
Absolutely great points. And that's a good segue then. Let's actually get into the slides a little bit. And yeah, Samantha, I want you to really let's have you get into the payroll side of things.
Okay. All right. So switching gears, first thing. So I'm sure you guys have all heard, like, you get what you pay for, which that can be true. In accounting, I think the importance for me, at least, is that balance rules everything. So we can't have the highest end product of every single thing possible, because we understand the cash flow situations and challenges of breweries. But with that said, I think there are certain areas where I really do want to encourage you to look for top tier products. And the payroll system is that first one. And when I first started out in my job, I had a sales call with this guy, and he very casually mentioned that he hadn't filed his income tax return in like 6 years. And I
And this is a business owner. A business owner
yes,
said that.
yes. I was like sweating. Like, I just literally had to go outside to finish the call because I felt myself like I was going to hyperventilate. You know what I mean? Like, I couldn't believe this human was just living his life, walking around, he's telling me stuff like, oh, well, this is, how I normally get paid, because he like works with like celebrities. And so he gestures behind him. There's like shoe boxes. And then he picks up one of the boxes and I'm like, okay, he gets paid in shoes, right? He opens up the shoe box. It's filled with cash.
What?
Like,
This is
this
not a
human's
joke.
just,
This is real.
no, this is real. Like, I mean, like, I remember I was like, I'm going to cry or I'm going to throw up. I'm not sure which. And I'm like, get it together. You're on a sales call, but it was very traumatic for me. Right. My point is, he's living his life like this. And I'm sure that caught up to him. Like, not okay. Never advisable. Like, file your extension if you're not going to file on time. And FYI, an extension is an extension to file, not an extension to pay. You still have to pay your stuff on time. But at any rate, my point is, I had another client, a brewery, opened up their brewery. They're doing everything the best that they can. They set up a payroll system. They're like, we're going the cheapest options because that's, what we want to be budget conscious. So we're trying to be responsible. 10 months in, they're almost shut down because they didn't pay the right amount to their payroll provider for payroll taxes. I'm guessing it's one of those things they kind of set it up in a rush, asked their UI number, whatever. They didn't know. They probably hit like skip for now buttons. And the next thing you know, they're getting this threatening letter from the government saying that they're going to levy their house and shut down their business for not paying a tax that they didn't even realize they weren't paying, right? So yes, income tax is incredibly important. You need to file that on time, but your payroll taxes, your 1099s, this is all highly regulated. And it's important to be on top of that stuff. So I would tell you to focus on a payroll system that's going to take compliance very seriously. There are probably several out there that are really good at that. I personally have had excellent experience with Gusto.
We use Gusto on our end as well, actually, for the Fifth Ingredients payroll.
So you know what it's like to get like their emails. Like, they send so many emails being like, urgent, you need to do this, action required, which I appreciate. I mean, I don't like getting startled every time one of those emails comes in, but I appreciate that they have my back. And when like we do get letters in the mail, you can just send that to them and they handle it, which is awesome too. So a nice perk. I would definitely keep that in mind. Another thing with your payroll system that you want to at least consider is some type of HR function. I think what we saw a few years ago, most of you are familiar about why having HR support in your brewery is something that should not be overlooked. I know we're always looking for ways to cut costs, and there's definitely value in that. But at a minimum, this is worth a Google, right? There's a lot of options out there. You can consider hiring a part-time HR specialist to work in your brewery. You can hire a full outsourced HR firm to support the brewery. You could even just do like an add-on package. So like Gusto has something where it's, I don't know how much it is, probably a couple $100, but you can have like HR support with like a SHRM certified advisor that you can access that will help take care of things, regarding HR, like employee handbooks, the job descriptions, corrective action plans, things like that. So take a look at the payroll provider you're using and see if they can help support you with HR as well.
The one thing I'll just quickly ask, because you would know this way better than I would, on the payroll side, if people are dealing with tips, and whether it's cash tips or whether it's things like that, what would be like the 30-second version, just because of the timing, Samantha, that you would recommend for my—
Please report it. Report it. A lot of my breweries do use Gusto and it works really well. And you absolutely should report your tips. And there's like tip credits and things like that. So if you have questions, just reach out to us. We can walk you through it. We've done it before. It can get complicated, but yes, report your tips. And your payroll system, it's great for that. Gusto does do that.
Cool. Awesome. And with that as well, with Gusto, there are referral pieces as well and referral credits that people end up getting. So definitely hit us up for that. Both Samantha and I have referral credits for Gusto. So definitely happy to chat about that as well if anybody's looking to switch. Cool. All right. Timing wise, let's move on. Next up, Samantha, you got accounting systems. Should be fun.
Oh, yes. Okay. This one's my favorite. So these are key for breweries. There's a ton of moving pieces when you're running a brewery, but this is the essential product, in my opinion. I'm the accountant saying that, but I always say the difference between
saying that accounting systems are essential. That sounds great.
I'm not biased. I always say the difference between doing your books in real time and keeping, versus like keeping your receipts in, in that shoebox under the bed. And then you bring it to me on April 10th and you're like, look. The difference between those is like having headlights on when you're driving your car at night versus driving around in the pitch black. if you can't see where you're going, you don't know what's coming, right? So how can you make those right choices? How do you know when to pivot, to turn, slow down, speed up? You don't know what's coming, right? You need to be able to have an accurate picture of your financials in real time. So a few things to consider with your, picking your accounting system, because there's a ton of options out there. First, a strong personal preference of mine is to use a system that's well known and where you own the data. That data is yours and nobody's going to keep it on you. There are some companies out there that have their own like proprietary systems and they'll do your books for you in that system. But if you decide to leave them, it's really difficult to get that data extracted so that you can take it to your next firm. Like for me, if you come to me, I'm doing your books in either QBO or Xero, right? So if you leave me for another firm, I just transfer that subscription over. That data is yours. No, we're not keeping it.
And I'm just going to add one more piece here because I've dealt with this with Beer30 customers that's training on. Please switch to QuickBooks Online. Let's get away from QuickBooks Desktop. We are in 2024. Please do not use desktop anymore. It's an online subscription. It's a monthly fee. We only, Beer30 only introduced with QuickBooks Online, and we definitely have told customers that you need to switch from desktop to online because of this. So I just want to put that out there as we're going through this. Just QuickBooks Online.
We don't even support desktop. Yeah, totally agree. Second, look for the essential integrations. So you don't need every integration under the sun, right? Like some exist and we don't even turn them on. Like the client has it, but we keep it off like for a good reason, right? So you don't need an integration with everything. You need it with the important things. For me, the important things, number one is your bank account. Number two, your payroll system. After that, having an integration with your brewery management system is a nice to have. Having an integration with your POS can be good, but that's actually one of the ones that we keep turned off usually. So it can be helpful, but it's not essential. So look for the important ones. Lastly, you want a system that's easy to use and easy to understand. For me personally, when it comes to ease of use, I prefer Xero. It's very user-friendly, it's budget-friendly, but there's a ton of excellent cloud-based accounting systems out there. So do your research, pick the one that fits your needs. I know a ton of breweries like to save money by using Excel. I promise you, the monthly cost of a high-quality accounting system is not going to break your bottom line. In fact, it's likely to save you money, right? There's the automation, the efficiency, so bank reconciliations, and even invoice generation right there. That's going to save you time. But then further, there's that reduced opportunity for human error compared to manual data entry in Excel. And with integrations to bank accounts, you're getting that real-time data. So having all of your data in your accounting system from the get-go now means you're scalable, right? All that historical data is in there. So you don't have to pay an accounting firm an hourly rate down the road to enter it all in for you. You also don't want to bring an accounting firm an Excel spreadsheet and be like, here are my expenses, right? Like no accounting firm wants to build your tax return, especially for a brewery with all your fixed assets off of an Excel sheet. Have that stuff in an accounting system. You're running a business, right? So that's everything for accounting systems. Moving over to
real quick. So this is awesome. What we'll do is I have some additional thoughts on APAR GL syncing that I think would be really good to talk to people about. What we'll do is I think after the next segment of brewery systems, then I can get more into what that actually looks like. So
love it.
Right, nice. So over to you. Next slide would be brewery management.
Brewery management. I love this gift. This one's short, relatively easy. If you're here, it's probably because you know of Beer30, right? There's a lot of these brewery management systems popping up lately. I can let Pulkit speak more about what you want to look for. I think the biggest thing for me when you're choosing this is choose carefully, right? I've had a couple clients that made a switch because of price, right? They were like, oh, I don't want to pay this anymore. I'm going to switch over here. They switched for 3 months, 4 months, and then they had to switch back. And the cost, right? Like they're paying us to look into this and they're spending their hours and hours of their time trying to fix the errors that came from trying that switch, right? Like it can be exhausting. So choose carefully initially, right? This is not one of those things that you want to, I understand being price conscious, but you really want a quality system here. Look for something that can answer your questions about COGS so you can make informed decisions to run your breweries. That's like what a lot of my strategy sessions are. And I absolutely love it because I get to, use all of Pulkit systems and data to come into my strategy sessions. And I feel like I'm taking the credit and I get to look so smart because I'm telling them like, hey, this is the margin on this beer and this is the margin on this beer. So let's, use that data and plan accordingly, right? I think the biggest piece to remember here, though, garbage in, garbage out. So if you're going to invest in a brewery management system, which I would recommend, for the love of God, please use it correctly. I can't tell you how many of my breweries, like the brewer doesn't like tech or whatever the issue is, they're not using it correctly, and you're just lighting that money on fire. So if you're going to use one, use it correctly.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think with that, kind of as we were kind of prepping for today, one of the things that I really wanted to highlight was accounting syncs, right? And Samantha mentioned this earlier when it comes to QuickBooks or Xero. I really wanted to point this out because this is one of the key areas that I think a number of breweries end up struggling with in making this decision. So in particular, this is a screenshot from the Beer30 side when it comes to different paths. And we actually looked at all of at that point when we built these out, we looked at competitors, did market research by talking to Samantha at Lance CPA, talking to other brewery firms. And what we came up with was that there's actually two ways to do accounting reconciliation. There's APAR syncing and there's general ledger syncing. And pretty much what I'm going to just have outline explicitly is with APAR syncing, think of this as like hey, you're just syncing over the fact that I owe you money or you owe me money as the brewery. And at that point, for example, with Beer30, you're syncing over purchase orders, bills to pay, sales orders. But really, Beer30 is then that source of truth for everything with WIP, COGS, inventory depletions. And we have all the data in Beer30 for what is happening with raw materials, packaging, supplies, finished goods. And you're then able to perform journal entries in your Xero or QuickBooks Online. This is the bare minimum that you should be doing when it comes to accounting systems, especially if you're running a business and it's not a hobby. On the other end, there's the GL syncing piece where with that, you're actually getting to everything for liabilities, work in process, assets, expenses, revenue, and every single transaction that's happening through your data management system like Beer30 is then getting pushed onto your balance sheet real time. And this becomes like the ultimate amazing standard that you want to be from an account management perspective, but just being realistic that could be a lot for a lot of breweries. And so we give people that optionality to pick of, hey, go the APAR and switch into GL when you're ready. But this is something that as you're looking at systems and as you're looking at cutting corners, be mindful that there are ways to set this up correctly out of the gate so that you're not spending hundreds to thousands of dollars trying to get this fixed after the fact, because I've definitely seen that happen with a number of our customers and the firms that they use.
100%. Yes. This slide to me screams, it's like that saying, what is it? What gets measured gets managed, right? Like,
yep, measure what matters, and exactly, that's exactly right.
Yeah. You got to pay attention to that stuff. So again, this is for if you're running a business, right? You're looking at your margins, you're looking at these things. You want to take care of the financial health of your brewery. This stuff is really important.
Beautiful. All right, next over. Next up,
okay,
let's get into tap rooms and good old T Swift here.
I just had to. Okay, I had to. All right, so thank you for allowing me to be me.
Yeah, of course, always.
So tap room. This is my last slide. This is going to be like a little bit of, just a mix of a bunch of things here. So basically, I know that a lot of you guys are, the head brewer and also the taproom manager and also the owner and also probably like the janitor. Like there's so many, the owners breweries, you guys wear so many hats. And it can be easy to overlook some things like your social media or your events planning because you have a lot on your plate. It makes sense. I have a lot of empathy for the situation, but it's my job to come here and still remind you not to overlook those things that are going to really make your tap room stand out, because that's your cash cow, right? And that's what I need for you to be able to do well in and to be able to succeed at. So I work with a ton of breweries. I frequent a lot of breweries. So these are just general high-level suggestions of things I've seen that, were either really awesome or I've seen make a meaningful difference on a bottom line for a client. So the first one is obvious, but it's social media marketing, right? I think this is huge. One of the best things you can do is if you have food, take pictures of your food and post that. I mean, I'm a sucker for this. I will not lie. We have a local brewery here that he's always doing smash burgers. And, it's like Monday, I didn't do the meal planning. I didn't do the grocery shopping. There's no food in the house. I see his post with that burger on there and I know all I have to do is screenshot that to my husband and that's what we're eating that night, right? Like it makes it so easy for your customers to just come in, so post those pictures. Don't just post on the regular page, use reels in addition to that, and use the platforms that target your target market. And then also get advice from somebody that's not an accountant that can barely log into Facebook. I know Pulkit's worked a lot with Julie Rhodes, right? So there's lots of options out there, but get more professional help. So that's social media. Next, events. So this is twofold, right? We have the small everyday events like our trivias and our paint and sips, and those are great for establishing your regular, reliable traffic. But in addition to that, I would encourage you, if you have the space, to consider private events. This is something I can talk a lot more about. I do a lot of advisory work around private events. So if you have questions, if you're like, hey, I have some space, it could be utilized, I don't really know how, reach out to me. That's something that I can definitely support you with. But private events can be a game changer for breweries. So definitely look into that. Other fun ways that I've seen breweries drive traffic to their tap room includes bags tournaments, shuffleboard, pickleball, hosting a run club or a bike club, and even book clubs. The next one is my husband pronounces it niche nights. He says I'm wrong when I say niche, but I still like niche. So I'm going with it. We've got Taylor Swift on a kitten unicorn here. Items that you can do: themed nights, Dungeons and Dragons. People come out for that. Like there's like wait lists at our local brewery for the Dungeons and Dragons nights.
Nice. That's a pretty good one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. My husband is a dungeon master. Magic the Gathering is another good one. The Disney events are huge. There's a ton of Disney fanatics. I'm definitely one of them. And Taylor Swift.
And adding on to that, when I hear Magic, I'm also thinking Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon. I mean, if you want those audience, like I was definitely into the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card games and Pokemon with my Game Boy Color, Game Boy SP back in the day. So I'm sure people are still using that at this point, especially with Pokemon Go all around. So yeah, Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon, add that in with Magic, and I'm sure it's going to be a lot of fun for that crowd of
people what? I'm telling
early
you,
30s.
It might, I'm not telling you go off brand, right? I'm not saying, but I'll say this. I was at the CBP conference this past winter, and there was a brewery there talking about, they didn't want TVs in the tap room, right? Like he wanted to build, community, right? And so he was like, I don't want TVs. I feel like that's going to take away from, what we want. And people kept asking for them. And so eventually they added like 2 TVs in there, and they saw huge success from it. And he said it was a Catholic nun that gave him this advice of no margin, no mission. And I think that's important to just keep in mind. Like, I'm not telling you go off brand, maybe you're not a Swiftie. Okay, I can accept it. But be open to trying new things, especially if the vibe in the tap room is feeling a little bit stagnant, or you're looking to revitalize your tap room, you're looking for newer audiences. So like I said earlier, we'd be nowhere without the risk takers in the world. So, if you see something, try it out. If it doesn't work, you don't have to keep doing it, but I think it's worth trying.
Nice. I love that quote, by the way. No margin, no mission. That's an awesome quote.
I know. That was my favorite takeaway from that conference. It was awesome. Okay. So the next thing is food programs. I feel like I talk about this constantly. If you need advice, this is another thing I can talk a lot about. If you don't have a kitchen, you don't have space for a kitchen, like all is not lost. There are other options out there. Look into Milwaukee Pretzel Company. They have like a pretzel, like they even have like a thing where they'll heat it up for you and it's a large pretzel and everybody loves a pretzel with their beer. They'll ship them to you. And I think it's like, I don't know, I think it's like $5 a pretzel, right? You can sell that for like $14 in your tap room, right? Like that's a great margin. So you can still have food, right? So look into that, obviously, with your, local laws and all of that. But food programs are huge. And if you do sell food, if you do have a food program in your brewery, track your KPIs here. This is where it's really important to have an accountant looking, paying attention, and making sure that your food program is actually profitable, because food can get out of hand very quickly. If you have questions, reach out to me here, because this isn't a webinar on food programs, but this is something I can definitely talk to you a lot about. My last thing here is pricing. Evaluate your pricing. What I've been reading lately now, as far as state of the industry, is, rates are going to potentially be coming down in the coming months, and consumer tolerance for price increases is going to be decreasing with that, right? And so we want to make sure that we're priced appropriately now. So take a look at your pricing, pull your top 3 sellers out of your POS and see if you can't charge another 25 cents or 50 cents for those things, right? Charge for modifiers like, oh, I'm going to switch from regular fries to sweet potato fries. Add $1 to that, right? Little things like that will make a big difference in your bottom line. So stay aware of how you're priced. Look at your competitors, look at your costs, and price yourself appropriately.
Yeah, and I think one of the key things here, that last piece of look at your competitors with it, right? And making sure that you don't outprice yourself. So coming back into those 3 aspects of quality, efficiency, and sales, it just like on the quality
100%.
side, you got to keep your customers happy by making good beer. Same thing applies in this case by making sure that you're priced appropriately for wherever you are and what other breweries are around you as well. Knowing that, hey, at the end of the day, when you're looking at the beers that you're going to make, you got to track the COGS, which is really what the next segment is going to be, where I'm going to dive into a little bit more on the profit analysis side. Awesome. So, cool. We still looking at Taylor Swift here? Yeah. Nice. There you go. All right, cool.
Bye,
Next up. Bye, Tay Tay. Yes, exactly. Cool. All right. 6 areas of profit analysis. So on my end, let's talk. We're going to get into process optimization, quality control, inventory and material resource planning, cost of goods sold, also known as COGS, sales and distribution, and time savings across the team. Anybody watching this, the big thing I want you to remember always is your overall focus: brew more, brew better. Really, those are the 2 hashtags we use in our system: brew more, brew better with Beer30. But in general, you should just focus on brewing more and brewing better. With this, let's just go through this list. So first one, process optimization. Improve and control your brew to package yield. Right? At the end of the day, you want to look at the results that are happening and increase output per batch. Your team is there brewing constantly, and you want to make sure that you're able to reduce the cost of goods per barrel, hectoliter, and liter. And really, that means that you understand just where those losses are going. So as you're looking at that, really start identifying the variances that happen for a particular brand and batch, from brewhouse yield, filter transfer yield, packaging yield, and the overall brew to package yield and losses, right? You know for a fact that your overall yield for a lager is going to be very different than a triple dry hopped IPA, for example. And understanding that those losses on the filter side, centrifuge side, etc., are there becomes a really good way to focus on the optimization that can come from a process controls perspective. Samantha, you're more than welcome to chime in at any point.
I love this. Like, this is so many times. I can remember I was on a strategy session with a brewery once, and they use spreadsheets for their, like, inventory management. And I'm sitting here and I'm just like looking at their financials, and I finally, I was like, there's a hole in the boat. Like, I feel like there's water coming into my rowboat. I know that, right? But I can't find this gosh darn hole because we don't have any of the data we need, right? Like, again, this is huge. It's so important.
Yeah. Awesome. So with that, continuing on, minimizing tank turn time, right? This means that we're resulting in an increased overall fermentation cellar capacity. That's huge, right? If you end up having more beers that are going through in less days, you're getting more beer output without having to invest any money in tanks. That's a huge component of it. From there, understanding your key fermentation metrics. That could be as simple as things like, hey, how do I optimize my cellar schedule? How do I streamline recipe variations with fermentation trends, which you're able to do if you're really tracking your gravities, pH, temperature, and VDK. So from a brewer's perspective, these are really critical from understanding the process controls that are present. Speaking as a process engineer for Ballast Point, this is how, when Ballast Point sold for $1 billion, a lot of it was coming from being able to understand, how do we get sculpin out the door? How do we get 8 turns of sculpin a day? Right? A lot of that comes from understanding what's happening on the brewing side, losses side. And no matter what magnitude you're looking at, a couple of percentage points for losses because of packaging, we had kegs that were being overfilled and beer was going down the drain. Those add up very quickly to have literally hundreds to thousands to tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on the scale that you're at.
100%.
Yeah. So from there, let's talk about quality control. Again, quality is key. Have real-time alerts and sign-offs at every step of the process, right? Be in a position where you're really mitigating those production mistakes before they move further down the process and consume additional materials, time, and tank spaces, right? If you had something go wrong on the brew process side of things, on the brew finish, you're like, this beer is kind of dicey. Got it, right? Don't try and save it and be like, oh, we'll see how things go for a couple days. If you know that it's going to be a bad batch and you're not going to be able to save it, just end it, as opposed to having more days that it's sitting and occupying tank space, because it's not going to be quality. You want to have a consistent product, right? Take the loss, take the hit. I'm sure, Samantha, there's some R&D or some quality pieces that come from a tax write-off perspective. Go that route. And same thing with ready to filter and ready to package, and really understand what's happening from a first step aspect and making sure your team is doing real-time signups. From there, tracking yeast and really understanding pitching, harvesting, propagation, genealogy becomes critical from a quality standpoint. And this is where your brewery management system should be super helpful in making sure that they're able to help on a sign-off process and yeast aspects, just so that way you can focus on repitching and actually minimizing the fresh pitch costs that happen. From there, proactive validation. You're a brewery. Set target tolerances for each critical brew spec. This is a screenshot out of Beer30 that's showing what's happening on the mash inside. Provide the user with instant feedback, right? Intuitive, red, yellow, green. We all understand what that means, right? And again, we do have things set up for colorblind, just pointing that out because that's come up in the past. But red, yellow, green, and understanding, hey, this beer is not up to spec, and being proactive on brew day, so that way there's real-time alerts that are going out saying, hey, your mash is not up to spec, something's going on with your lauter. That real-time validation on brew steps becomes critical for a successful overall system. Same thing on predictive analysis, right? Observe the gravities that are happening on a daily basis, graph it out. This is a great example where in this case, the gravities are super tight when it comes to the spread, the day numbers, and hey, everything is starting off around 1069 specific gravity. And yet, if I were to take these same exact 6 beers and look at pH, hey, beer pH is different and it's wide ranging, going from 5.1 to 5.9. And this is a real story from one of our customers where the water coming in from the city was changing. They didn't realize that until they started graphing out. Yeah, exactly.
It's so funny how the littlest things can change, right?
Yeah, and water is a key component of beer, obviously.
Of course,
So water chemistry changing can have a huge impact on pH. And not if you're not tracking that, you may think, yeah, gravities are working really well, but take actions when you're like, hey, the pH is off, it's going to lead to an impact for your beer, right? So that predictive analysis becomes really critical from a quality control perspective and making sure that you're not cutting corners when it comes to quality. Next, topic 3, inventory and MRP, material resource planning. So really use the data that you have to improve your MRP. Pretty much what this means is develop just-in-time purchasing processes for raw materials and packaging supplies. You really don't want it to be that you're sitting on thousands of dollars of inventory. Minimize the cash flow, minimize the warehouse space that ties up with excess inventory, minimize the losses due to expiration of raw materials. Imagine you had a bunch of ingredients, grains, hops that just went out of stock, or you had to destroy them because they got expired, right? And with that, same thing with packaging materials. If you over engineer and over source a bunch of beers that eventually get seasonality or get phased out, you're gonna have to throw those away. So getting into that material resource planning perspective and understanding forecasting becomes critical from a cash flow perspective.
This one's my favorite one.
Nice. How do you do that with customers right now? What's your workflow with them?
I mean, it doesn't happen with great success if I'm 100% honest. Like it's hard, like so many of my clients, like they're getting better now, but a lot of times it'd be like, well, I don't feel like making that one.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thermometer
Mm-hmm.
maker. Can we
Yeah.
can we try? Can we
Mm-hmm.
try? So I mean, this is hugely important, and the expiration of raw materials. I've seen that happen. Like they bought a ton in bulk, like, oh, I got a good deal on it, and it's like, yeah, what was the date on that, right? Because it just went bad, and then you're dumping beer, and that like I'm sure you know how to brew, Pulkit. I am not a brewer, but my husband made me do it with him once, and we were making a black IPA, and it was like 4 hours. We were up really late. I go to bed by like 8:45 p.m. It was not my jam. It was like 10:15, and then we broke the thermometer in
Oof.
the. I had to throw it away, and I was so salty. I never tried it again.
All
So
right, fair enough. So
went out on a big loss there. But yeah, dumping beer, that's rough. That's really rough. And obviously it's gonna hit your finances too. So
mhm.
this is super important.
Yep, great call, Samantha. And so with that, from an MRP perspective, making accurate purchase decisions to ensure operations run while keeping cash flow in check. And so this is a great example out of Beer30 with MRP and checking what's happening on a week by week basis. What do you need to order with suggested orderings to be able to really go from there? Cost of goods sold, COGS, one of my favorite acronyms. That is effectively what everything needs to tie in on. Use the data to calculate exact COGS for each brand and packaging type. You need to gain visibility on the profitability for each SKU that your brewery is selling. And with those individual SKUs, you're then able to look at how do you reduce costs with recipe optimization, right? If you are making an IPA, for example, and it is a grapefruit IPA, maybe you need a less dry hop bill, for example, right? You're looking at ways to look at flavor profiles. Maybe you can reduce the cost. Adjusting prices to make sure that you have an attractive margin. And really, one of the biggest things, tracking COGS from batch to batch, identifying shifts in COGS over time, and then from there, using those to make actual decisions and strategy changes for purchasing, operations, and pricing. And this is critical. And really, what the key here ends up being is you need to understand how blends and merges and transfers are happening. And this is where some of the proprietary algorithms that we have in Beer30 becomes so critical from a cost of goods perspective to really understand what's the variance between a target and an actual, right? At the end of the day, when you're brewing, you should know that a 6-pack of your IPA all in is going to be this amount of dollars. That's your target. And your actual is really going to differentiate based off of what happened. Maybe you had to overnight ingredients. Maybe you had to actually look at an increase in losses. Those pieces tie in importantly for a variance versus targets. And this is where process improvement becomes a really good way to understand grains, hops, adjuncts, packaging supplies, labor, rentals, final landed costs with taxes and shippings. Like all of those goes in to making your actual cost of goods sold. From there, look at it of COGS per batch, right? Compare for bottles, cans, and kegs on a batch by batch basis. Example here, 24-pack of bottles is $15.28, cans is $11.41, kegs are $92.84. Well, with this information, being able to really break down on a per pint level, on a per can level, to understand what those profit margins end up being. From there, take it a step further. Look at it for the same brand, but across different batches. So now I have my brown sugar ale beer, and I'm able to compare batch 13 versus 14 versus 11 versus 12. And this is a story that is so critical to understanding just how your beers are performing on a batch by batch basis. And then from there, we get into variance reports out of Beer30 here as well, of actual versus COGS and how those variances are trending over time. And then finally getting into then what that means from a user perspective of being able to then make those active decisions on, hey, what do I need to do? What's the strategic changes that we need to do based on these talks?
Hugely important.
Yeah. Nice. So with that, let's actually get into the sales and distro side. So topic number 5 from profitability. Use your real-time brewery inventory to showcase to your team exactly what and when beers are going to be available. This is huge. This is how you ensure that you have clear inventory stock numbers, you're meeting your production timelines, and that your team is never missing a sales opportunity. The last thing you want is your sales team going to a particular bar, restaurant, wherever, and not knowing exactly what they can sell. It's just not a good look.
100%. Yes, completely agree. Yeah, don't let your sales team sell something that you don't have, right? Or it's just, yeah, so important.
Absolutely. And with that, focus on minimizing overcommitments, right? Have the data do the work for you. In Beer30, track the back orders, right? If I have an order that isn't available to complete right now, I can still make that in Beer30 as a future order, but that'll then show you, hey, I have this amount on back order. Am I really going to be able to make that demand? And that's where the magic of other modules like demand planning, material resource planning, like all of those production forecasting tools become critical if you're really running a business. And from there, understand, hey, what do we need to get out of this? Are we making this a seasonal limited release? How are we changing things? All part of the sales and distribution strategy. And really from there, this is where, for example, the finished goods traceability module in Beer30 becomes critical when it comes to understanding batch codes in cold box and warehouses. Batch codes are such a critical component from a quality piece of understanding, hey, just what's in stock, but then adding that as part of aging. So that way I can know, from example here, what's aging for the 0 to 30 days, 31 to 60, 90-day, 120, 180, and greater than 180, because then I know exactly what the aging of my beer is. And am I going to have particular beers that are going out of stock right now or going out of season? Maybe they're aging out and their quality is going to suffer. And I want my sales team to start selling those more just to get that going. Because, hey, from accounts perspective, that's literally thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of inventory that may be out of SKU and maybe out of season soon. So aging becomes critical from understanding from a sales and distro perspective, just what your team needs to be selling. Yeah.
This is making me think of like my house. like right, like when we go to the grocery store and I'm like buying like salmon and steak, right, and then like it's like sitting in the back of the fridge and I keep like going to the brewery for smash burgers. I'm gonna need a abbreviated version of this for my home, please, Pulkit.
There you go. See how old stuff is sitting in Samantha's fridge. That is the next rendition. Fridge 30, as we like to call it, instead of beer 30.
Yes, let's go.
Nice. Cool. All right. So wrapping up here, time savings across the team. Consolidate, consolidate, consolidate. Multiple spreadsheets, paper sheets, email digests into a central source of truth. Use a system. Or if you're not going to pay for something like Beer30 or a competitor, create pivot tables based on interconnected spreadsheets. If you don't know how to do that, you need to have a system. That's effectively the way I think about it. If you're not able to create pivot tables that tie in with multiple Excel spreadsheets or Google Sheets, get a system, because that's really going to make your life easier, going to show profitability, and really lead to time savings. And from there, use that data to work productively with task management, real-time alerts, and really understand from that information time savings, pre-built sheets, tax reporting. In Beer30, Brewers Report of Operations, pick a start date, end date, you have the details that are there. Australian excise, New Zealand excise tax, same thing. 2-click excise reports, you're good to go. We also have some state-specific details for different states in the US. So just very much aligned with what do we do to optimize savings. Also stuff in Canada and other countries as well. And finally, avoid the redundancies. The more you have people write stuff on a piece of paper, then into a spreadsheet, then send that end of shift email, the more chances are things are going to break. Save that time, make it centralized, and help everybody out. Cool. Those are really the 6 areas. So the final thing I always like to talk about, set up team meetings, track results, right? So with this, hey, maybe set up a bi-weekly meeting with your department, process and quality, operations and people, marketing, sales, 4 key areas, and really set an agenda, outline the areas that need improvement, where maybe you're not hitting targets, those all tie in, and then start doing root cause analysis on areas that may be issues, and then start making those changes and tracking weekly results. All of those really tie in from what do we do to keep things going, making changes and being able to succeed. Nice. With that, wrapping up, closing. Again, state of the industry, operations. We talked about payroll, accounting systems, brewery management, taproom side of things, profit analysis, and kind of that's it. So, yeah. Open anything else, Samantha, you want to add in? That's really open to questions. We'll have people email us for more questions as well. You can email me, pk@the5thingredient.com, Samantha at revelcpa.com. And definitely, Samantha, if you want to add in some final words here, it would be awesome to hear from you. Kind of any last tips for people that are watching and tuning in on this?
I mean, this is my thing that I've learned. Like, my greatest takeaway in all the strategy I've done is what works for one doesn't work for all. I've done a ton of benchmarking for breweries, and like certain things, certain suggestions I was making earlier today, right? Like it might work for a few breweries and it might not work for yours, right? And that's okay. Like, that's part of what we love about craft beer, is how unique it is and how special it is. But I also, I was saying this earlier, we talk, like, the brewing community is really supportive and it's really collaborative. And we talk a lot about, the different things that we're going through, and we'll talk about vendor recommendations and things like that. But one thing we're not as open about is, our finances, right? And where we're struggling and where we're succeeding. And so my hope is just to kind of get the breweries, thinking more about this. Like, money is such a taboo subject. And I want people to feel more comfortable talking about this and sharing about where you're struggling, where you're succeeding, and helping one another grow. Because, I mean, I'm heavily invested in this industry, as are all of you, right? And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to lift up this industry and support it, because we know we're in a tough time right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it, Samantha. Yeah. So again, if anybody is interested in chatting with me or Samantha or any of our teams, reach out. Well, this will be on YouTube. We'll send this link out as well. And yeah, looking forward to definitely hearing from people about this. And if there's any questions about taproom, accounting, brewery management systems, again, Samantha and I are here to help out.
For sure. Thank you, Pulkit. I appreciate your time.
Sure. Cheers, everyone. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye, everybody.